Hello, and welcome to the 495. I'm your host, Doug Sparks, editor-in-chief of Merrimack Valley Magazine. They checked my temperature, Lou, when I came in here for the first time ever.
That was news to me.
News to you. They didn't check your temperature this morning?
I didn't know. Usually we get memos about everything, so I'm a little surprised.
This is and I know it's happening to a lot of people. This is the second time it's happened to me. Last week we pre-recorded the episode, which meant I got to go to the dentist for the first time since this whole thing started. And they checked my temperature, and there were a whole bunch of procedures in place.
Well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that.
Makes sense. They gave me a special peroxide solution I had to swill that I had never used before. So and it looks strange. It looks alien.
Yeah, how does it taste?
The peroxide solution was fine. I'm just saying the dentist office itself, because there's sort of plastic sheets everywhere. So it reminded me a little bit of like the Alien movies. You know what I mean? Like it just looked strange, and everybody had masks on, and it made it sort of surreal. It freaked me out a little bit first, I'll be honest. But
everything's a little bit uncomfortable right now.
And then the dentist did the instrumentation. That's never happened to me. It's always an assistant.
Yeah.
So our
new normal.
The new normal for how long? Who knows? So our guest this week is Henri Marchand. He's the Director of Cultural Affairs and Special Events for the City of Lowell. Henry, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, absolutely.
Great.
Hey, in 2019, you were named City Magician of Lowell. What is the City Magician of Lowell?
The City Magician, it's Councilor
That's
Noon.
the budget director.
I think was yeah. You know how many times I've had the question, can you take care of the budget with magic? The Councilor Noon had been threatening to make a motion to name me the City Magician since I began doing the manager and the mayor's annual holiday reception and performing a little magic for the folks there. And he finally decided to do that, and that was very nice of him, and I think it was a little bit of fun for the council and brought a little bit of fun to the meeting, something a little different. And but it was quite an honor. I don't know how many city magicians are out there, but it's a fun title, and I appreciate the recognition.
Hey, so there's something I wanted to ask you. I'm going to play armchair psychologist a little bit and ask you about magicians. And there's one thing I find fascinating about them. And the magicians who I think of, when I think of great magicians like... Magician, like Ricky Jay or Penn and Teller or the Amazing Randy, they sort of have a dual personality, because part of what they're about is they're kind of con artists. They have this dark side where they like manipulating people, and yet at the same time, they also seem to be driven to like exposing truth and exposing hookum and all sorts of things that people are conned by. Do you see this is this an aspect of the magician personality?
I think so. I think if you go back to Houdini, he was certainly a magician, but specialized in escapes, and people wondered how he did it. But he also did magic. He made an elephant disappear in his time. But he also was very much an anti-spiritualist person. Conan Doyle was a big spiritualist. They believed that they could speak with the dead and all that. And so there were folks who would prey on folks at the time and try to talk to their loved ones, and so they would pay them money, and he realized these were cons. And so he championed against that and showed and exposed their methods on how they did that with seances and all of those things. So being a magician, he knew how to deceive people, but he did it, as most magicians, Penn and Teller and others, do it for entertainment, to bring a little fun and awe and amazement to folks. Others do it as, to deceive folks. And so that, at least is the earliest that I recall, is Houdini starting that, and others have done it along the way. Penn and Teller have an interesting spin, as they've exposed secrets, not necessarily things that are bad, but the way they do their magic, the way they do their entertainment, especially in the early days, they expose things, you could see it, and then in the end, typically, though, they would still get you. And it was done in the, just in fun and an entertainment factor.
Sure. So you've been doing magic. We'll get into the politics and everything else, but you've been doing magic for almost 50 years. Is that correct?
Probably just about that, a little bit more. Yeah.
Okay, a little bit more. So how'd you get into it?
I was casting about for a hobby and a way to impress girls at the time in high school, I think. So I went to the library here, the Pollard Memorial Library, and they had a bunch of books on magic. So I pulled out a few and started learning tricks and reading that. and I found that I had taken up guitar before, and that didn't work out. Music wasn't in me, so I went to magic, just a slight different spelling. And it was fun, and so I did some variety shows in high school, and did some other things as I went along. And surprisingly, it did introduce me to my wife. The first date we had, and a friend set up, I did a few magic tricks, and
you did not.
45 years later, we're still, I'm still amazed her, I think.
You did not do magic tricks on your first date.
I did. That's why magicians sometimes the kids are known as nerds until they go to Vegas, and then they're cool. I never went to Vegas.
Yeah, you never prank it. Did you ever prank like the waiter in a restaurant? Do you ever use it for to amuse yourself and pull one over on people?
No. If people ask, I'll do something. I little pranks or tricks that you do that are just sort of throwaways and fun, kind of off the cuff. But I've never done that to waiters or to surprise people. I like to be asked. I don't like to impose any surprises.
Sure. But part of the reason why we're talking today is you're actually retiring next week from working with the City of Lowell. We'll talk more about that. Do you plan on doing magic after you retire?
I hope so, and I've been doing it. I've been doing some gigs in the past years, but it's tough to keep up the practice. So part of my schedule and my to-do list is to work on some more effects, some more routines, and hopefully when we come out of this isolation, it's pretty tough to do close-up magic in these times.
Yeah.
I'll get back into it. Of course, I do it for my grandkids, and they're getting a little older. They're beginning to figure some things out. Got my grandson his magic kit for last Christmas, but I hope to get back into it and start doing more of that. I do some charity shows on occasion, so help out, and if it brings some fun to certain events, I'm happy to do that.
Sure. So I know nothing about magic. I don't do practice magic. I don't know anything about it, and I'm always I always wonder how do you learn? So you say you're working on new routines. Do you come up with them based on putting together bits of routines? Are you looking at somebody like Houdini and trying to figure out how he did tricks? Do you go to a master up in the mountains? Like how do you take that next step when you're still kind of learning and looking for something new to do?
The master in the mountains. Well, it could be what's the Harry Potter school? You could go there.
Hogwarts.
I tried, and I just crashed into the railroad wall, masonry wall. Well, different ways. The typical story of somebody who gets involved with magic is they're young, probably 7 to 14 years old. They either get a magic kit for Christmas, or they see a magician, and then they go to the library. At the time you went to the library. Today it's a lot of online stuff, and start to do it. And like any other hobby, whether it's music or other things, it's practice. So the good ones, the really good ones, like Ricky Jay and Penn and Teller and others, that you may not have heard of, but you see them on Penn and Teller. They practice. It's like I heard Eric Clapton. He would just come home from school or whatever, spend 5, 6, 7, 8 hours a day practicing the guitar. So practicing it in muscle memory and just going over and over obsessively about it. Those are the great ones. Ricky Jay, if you saw his documentary, talks about doing this for 8 hours a day, dealing cards, learning to deal seconds, learning to deal bottoms, all of the things that you need to do to really make it seamless, and then you add the entertainment factor onto it. So it's a lot of it is solitary work. There are clubs that folks join and work with older magicians, professional magicians, and in a club you can work out some material and develop that. In my case, I started with a simple card trick and then found some other things, found magic stores and magic catalogs, and began to order things. And then you put it together. You decide what your personality is. Everybody's personalities are different, as you mentioned some of them. Penn and Teller, Ricky Jay was a whole different folks. And one of the things is the cups and balls routine. If you Google that and look at that, is 3-set cups and balls routine is just a masterful presentation of that particular effect. So you learn it, and like anything else, you learn guitar, you learn notes, chords, and then songs.
Yeah. So you also have something of a radio background, right?
I do. I spent a few years over at UMass Lowell with the morning show, Sunrise. That was a lot of fun, as I'm sure you know from doing this program. And so worked with folks over there producing the Sunrise Show, which was a morning interview and talk show, public affairs show. And that was a lot of fun.
Do you get to listen to a bunch of what do you think of podcasts, and do you get a chance to listen to any?
I don't listen to a whole lot. I see a bunch of stuff. I go on Facebook. There's so many platforms now that it's difficult. I still listen to radio. Again, probably being old school, but some of the shows that are out there, whether it's music or public radio. My favorite Saturday is the Car Talk. I think they were doing replays of that,
yeah.
and things of that nature. If I'm, rather than have all visual and TV or YouTube. So radio, I think, still is a great, or podcast is now, I guess, the equivalent, at least for me now, since I'm not on Zoom, but of a radio and hearing voices versus seeing it. You can use your imagination.
Sure. Did you grow up in Lowell? I
did.
What was your childhood like?
My childhood was amazing. It was I'm one of 8 children, and so there was always some liveliness in the house, and grew up in a big old Victorian colonial near the university. My grandmother, grand aunt lived with us, and early on we had students from Lowell Tech that boarded in the house, and so we'd always have family gatherings at the house, and it was great. Haven't moved too far. As to paraphrase Thoreau, I have traveled far in Pawtuckettville. For the past 5 years, 50 feet into Dracut from Pawtuckettville, but so I'm one of those that hasn't moved too far away.
Yeah. So what, for people who don't know, what does a director of cultural affairs do?
I wish somebody would tell me.
I know you, and I'll tell you what I know of you is I get press releases from you. I get information. This is. I don't think we've met in person, but every week I get an email from you with a whole bunch of things that are going on, and we actually will use that information. So you send us, something's going on Friday night in Lowell. We put it into 8 great things to do this weekend. So we actually get a lot of information from Lowell and from you specifically that we can then use to let people know what's going on in the city.
We appreciate that. What we do here is the Cultural Affairs Special Events Office comes under the city manager's office, and we're tasked with a number of things, and it's evolved over the years. There are 2 folks that work with me here, Roberto Day, who's our special events coordinator, which is where I started about 3 or 4 years ago in this office, and Christian Hernandez, who's our program assistant. And so we do a bunch of things. There are 3 basic things. The office oversees the Like Lowell marketing campaign. There's a lot to like about Lowell, and we run ads in Merrimack Valley Magazine. We do banners downtown, kiosks, updates. We're doing that now and updating them for the next couple of months. We do the Like Lowell website, likelowell.com, and Like Lowell calendar. And that's sort of the fun side of this. The city has a municipal website, but we have the Like Lowell, and that provides all the information on events, on activities, on cultural groups, all of that. And so we promote all there is. Basically, it's a cliche, but I guess we promote all there is to like about Lowell on various platforms, and includes social media and other things. What I do every week is do a basic email, which is now probably old tech, but that sends out an outlook over the next month or 2 of what's going to be happening with links to those particular groups. And part of that is to begin as a way of letting downtown businesses know of what's coming up or what to expect, or commuters to know of any traffic issues. A number of years ago, at the Tsonga Center, there was the Future Scientists and the Future Medical Leaders of America conventions, and unusually they were allowed to go out, and they all left. There were 3,000, 4,000 kids and their family, and they all descended upon downtown for lunch, and nobody knew about it. So folks ran out of food. So now, after that, we realized, let's see if we can do this to help inform folks, but it also became another tool to promote what's going on So it's museums or dining or special events or walks and talks, history. So we categorize it that way, and so somebody can pick and choose, cherry pick, so to speak, what they might want to do this weekend, next week, or next month. And it complements some of the newer tech stuff, all the social media, the website, and the advertising. And some people like that format, so that seems to work out.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you about something that kind of shook me a little bit. I was reading an interview this week with this guy named Henri Rollins. Henri Rollins was a singer of a punk rock band called Black Flag, and then he went on, he got out of music, and he became a spoken word performer. He's an actor, he does movies, he does all sorts of different things. And I was reading an interview with him in which he said that he didn't think he was ever going to get on a tour bus and tour again because of COVID-19. And it shook me because I didn't think of that as even a possibility. The idea that someone is like, this part of my life is done, is over, it's really hard for me to think that the world has changed that much. Like, what effects have you, like, are you optimistic at all at how Lowell is going to pivot? Are we going to see the Lowell Folk Fest in 2021? Are we going to see the Summer Music Series come back? What are your thoughts on what's going to change in the city?
I think that those will come back, and I think there are two levels here. One, and which my take on it is, I think the medical professionals, and if we all follow their guidelines, will find resolution to this, and whether it's a vaccine or certain steps. Now, there may be certain things that don't change. There are folks who are not going to rush back right away into crowded situations or situations where this could be an issue, and smartly so. But I think that nationally we'll recover. I mean, we've recovered from a lot of things, and we've got the the benefit of current science, and that if they could do it 100 years ago, we could do it again. Locally, there's a lot to like about Lowell, and there'll continue to be a lot to like about Lowell. I think we'll figure that out as we go forward, and events this year obviously have taken a hit, but we're learning from others, and as the science and everything comes about. So, for instance, restaurants have begun to reopen, and the city, with the Economic Development Office here in the city, has worked hard with development services to create a way for restaurants to utilize parking spaces and expand their seating. They still have to be distanced, but it expands their seating where they might not be able to fit all those folks inside. They can utilize the sidewalk and then the parking spaces in front of the store. And that was a great concept that came out of economic development. The city, and through the manager's direction, they worked to streamline the process and the inspections and all of that. So, again, it shows what Lowell is known for, innovation. And I think the same will hold true for the other events, whether it's the theater, the Merrimack Repertory Theater, the other activities, the concerts, the Tsongas, the LMA. Those things I think we'll figure out a way to make that work in the mid to long term. So I think 2021 is a year I think everybody's looking forward to, and I think by that time, if I read the news and the science right, hopefully there'll be a vaccine or solution to this, and we'll get back to at least close to normal. It's going to take a while to get completely back, but because this has scared some folks. But I think that if people do the right thing, it's going to be great.
What are some cultural activities that people can do now, like, say, this weekend or into July in Lowell?
July, the New England Court Museum has announced that they'll be opening July 7th, I believe. I think that was in my email the other day. And, at least tentatively. So they're looking, and they're looking at the governor's guidance and going by that. And, again, just like going to, I go to Market Basket, early on I'd stand in line, wait like others, and they figured out how to, count people in and out. And I think those types of, whatever the steps they're taking will resolve it. So they're reopening. Others have gone virtual, which is working, I think, pretty well, and it keeps them, if people are checking them out, they'll see what they can look forward to when folks reopen and new exhibits in the art and museums and galleries come back. The larger venues, I'm sure they're looking at how are they going to set up and arrange for audiences and safety when they reopen with acts. I know that, I think in the fall, the LMA has a number of Jay Leno's coming back, and they've rescheduled. And so hopefully by then...
Good, because we gave away a free pair of tickets, I think on this podcast to the Jay Leno show. So if the person is listening, that's good that he's going to be rescheduled.
Yep, he's been rescheduled. So, just stay tuned with, checking out the websites. The other things that folks can do, and a lot of people, you've seen it, I'm sure, is people are walking about. You can take a stroll downtown. We got great canalways and river walks, and you can get a sense of the history and the outdoor public art. So those cultural things are still there. And with this great weather we've been having, a nice stroll along the river and through downtown to see the smaller and larger pieces of public art, a fun time. And now you can stop in at a local restaurant for a snack to keep you going or a beverage.
Do you have a proudest achievement?
A proudest achievement? Well, I guess there'd be a couple of them. Early in my career with the city, I worked in the city manager's office, and I had a number of programs that I was charged with. And I think one of them that I'm proud of the team, and again, everything's a team effort here, is the homeless camp cleanups that we began. There were a number of homeless camps at the time, and this is probably 8 or 9 years ago, and there hadn't really been a protocol on how to handle them, but there were more and more calls to work to clean them up and to provide services and incentive for the folks who were living there to get into better conditions. And so we developed a protocol and a timing with all of the social service agencies. We created a committee and met regularly. One of the first ones was the riverbank along the VFW highway across from the university. And there were probably 15 camps in there, but it was all overgrown. And so we set out working with, again, the social service providers to go out, talk to them, and give them a notice. In the past, I think things were done overnight, and camps were cleaned out, and that was not a humane way to deal with the problem. So we provided 2 weeks to talk to them and get them to utilize the services that are available, and then working to help them move their material and their belongings. Once that was done, then the owners of the property would have to go clean it up, and in that case, clear the brush and make it more open so that it would be less likely that these would return, but also that everybody could enjoy the riverbank and see the river from that area. And then there were a number of others in both public and private properties. But doing that and doing it and getting these things done after the first couple, what was rewarding was that the social service agencies noted that they had that a higher percentage of individuals took advantage of the programs and finally got into get the services they needed than they had imagined initially. So that was something that I think made a difference and made a difference in a positive way for everybody. The other thing, there's something, from the event side, I guess I would say the City of Lights. That was something that we began expanding when I was working at the Lowell plant some years ago. And, we finally went from a stroll to a parade one year with the help of some folks, including Paul Schwarby, who was working at the Sun at the time, who had come from Quincy. They had a big parade and created a parade. And we didn't know what to expect. At the time, I was up on Jackson Street. We were setting it up. I didn't know what was happening on Merrimack or Central. And counterpart that worked at the city at the time was up here. Our radios died. We couldn't talk to each other. So we sent the parade off. And as I went down along the parade, I saw hordes of people all lining the streets. And as I walked to get to City Hall, what struck me was the glint in the kids' eyes, the wonder, the awe to see. At the time, just shiny trucks and some floats and then Santa Claus at the end. And seeing the kids and just the happy faces really was striking. And I remember that and thinking, okay, this was worth it. This was cool. So that was particularly rewarding in terms of, having done something on the fun side.
Yeah. So you've planted all these seeds, and pushed for to bring attention to cultural activities in Lowell. If everything goes well, what does Lowell look like in 2030 culturally?
2030. I do magic. I don't foresee the future. I'm not a mind reader, but I think it'll just grow. Lowell is it's been through all sorts of cycles, and every time it comes out stronger. I think certainly we have challenges now, particularly with the COVID. But I think once we get past this, there are new developments. You look at what the city's done, and with planning and development, and over the years, and now coming to a point with the Hamilton Canal Innovation District. Some of the things I think that'll pop over there and create some real incentives. You look at what people like Jim Latulis did with Mill Number 5, and it's something that early on in '90, when Jordan Marsh left, we were left wondering what to do with that building, and it was a 120,000 square foot retail site. And one of the thoughts was to create an atrium inside and create a interior marketplace type of thing. The LDFC had bought it at the time. Lowell Development Financial Corporation land banked it. That didn't come to fruition. But then you look at Mill 5, and that's essentially that idea. It's in a mill. It's a downtown street inside a mill. Unique shops. It's just a fabulous place.
And for people who haven't been there, this is on Jackson Street, and speaking of Harry Potter, you feel kind of like you're going into a Harry Potter novel, right?
Exactly.
Is that a safe way to describe it? And there's a Red Antler Apothecary, which is an herbalist. We've had the Red Antler people on the show before. Yeah. Coffee and Cotton, it's a great coffee shop. There's a movie theater there, Luna. So it's a really fantastic place. And it's funny because it still remains kind of hidden. It still has this feel of something that has to be discovered.
And I think that's part of the allure with that. I remember going to New York to visit my son one time, and he said, we're going to go to a pizza place. And we went, I don't know how we got there in Brooklyn, but we're walking past these kind of typical New York brick walls with barbed wire on top, and we're going down, and it's just bleak. And I'm saying, where are you bringing us? We turn a corner, we come to this pizza place in the middle of this industrial wasteland. And we went in, it was a cool place, great pizza, great beers, but you had to find it. And that was its allure, and it was busy as heck.
Yeah.
So I think what they've done there is create a really neat kind of a Dickinsonian streetscape with some unique places, the Perrys with their vinyl destination, and that's great. But we also have, Brood Awakenings, great little coffee shop on Market Street. Andy Jacobson has been active in the downtown, and we have, so many other groups and core businesses that, continue. Over the years, we've had others. The Wells Emporium was a great shop. That's passed on, but then others pop up. Others come along. And, again, I think goes back to the innovation and what Lowell and, the community spirit can do, and the opportunities that people see in our post-industrial buildings and landscape.
So you told me that your last day in the office is next Thursday, so it's coming up quickly. Do you have any plans to continue work with the city on any sort of basis, a volunteer basis, part-time?
Obviously, I told the staff here that, I'm a call away if, in the short term, I've tried to organize everything and make things nice and neat, and we'll have a meeting next week to see where all the files are, and then I got briefing books, but I'm a call away if they need, something or information or background. Happy to do that. Other than that, we'll see what the future brings in terms of, I'm still sit on some volunteer boards and whatnot, but I'll take some time to unwind, and we've got our Meme and Pepe camp going for a few weeks with the grandkids. We're watching them now, so we'll be having some fun with them. So I'll stay busy between magic and the grandkids and the landscape yard work.
How are you going to celebrate?
Oh, I think quietly. So, maybe Friday, I think a couple of us are going out for a beer on Thursday, but I think Friday I'll just sleep late and sit on the back porch at the end of the day with a glass of wine or a beer and enjoy the quiet and try to figure out what I'm going to do next with when I grow up.
Sure. So I have one last question. It's a big question before I turn it over.
You got a bigger question?
A bigger question than that, even. It's maybe the biggest question. Why now? Why did you decide to retire?
Well, I'm older than I look. So I turned 67 this year, and I've been doing this for a while, and I think it was good timing. I would have probably stayed a little bit longer if the Folk Fest and 4th of July were going, but when those got canceled, I kind of moved up the timeline a little bit because there's time to relax, and the manager and others can take a look at what they want this to become, and somebody new. Anytime some new, younger blood and energy in this, I think. So I think it was good timing for me. With on a personal thing, is I can, and I know it sounds a cliche. Everybody says this, but spend some time with the grandkids before they become teenagers and say we're not going to have fun with you anymore. So it just provided some good timing and some good opportunity.
Lou, you have questions for Henry?
Yeah, let me tour around the subject levels a little bit here, Henry. First of all, let's start with magic, and I don't know anything about magic either. Never practiced it. I watch it, and I'm a fan, and I enjoy it. And I imagine it's very technique heavy. But do you guys spend any time on human psychology? What does magic teach us about human psychology? How do you use people against themselves in performing your tricks?
Well, there's a lot of psychology, whether it's in a lot of magicians. A guy who grew up locally went to UMass Lowell and was a psychology major and became, was a professional magician. He recently retired, Bob Reardon. And great guy. We've used him a couple times. But a lot of magicians, and there's a lot of discussion about that within the magic circles and the magazines and books discussing the psychology and how you manage perceptions or attention. Mm-hmm. And so whether we're trained or not, there's a lot of that at play. It's just knowing how people might react and how best to get the best effect from what they expect, and then you divert in another direction, and it's a surprise.
It's about manipulating the focus, right?
It is, and people say it's misdirection. It's not necessarily misdirection. It's conscious direction. So you're directing them. You're directing them to what you want them to pay attention to. And there's a lot of technique and whatnot. Yeah, I didn't. I maybe took one psychology course in college, but you kind of learn it as you go along, or reading the books and reading what, benefiting from the experience of others, and when they put it in writing and in columns, then you pick up on that and you say, okay, that's what I was doing.
All right, we're getting a little preview of it this summer, although it's masked and everything else that's going on with COVID-19. But talk about what the losses, the impending presumed loss of the spinners is going to mean for the city of Lowell.
The spinners are, they're just fantastic. I mean, that's one of the things that, so much to like about Lowell. I think it's a day like today, or the last couple of days, being able to go out, and where I'm at, I can walk down to the park over the bridge and sit out there. And I remember Paul Tsonga saying, when he first brought it up at the Lowell Plan meeting, he says, it's not about the baseball. He says, it's about the community conversation, about the community socializing. And he was so right. I've never been to a game where I saw more than maybe 2 or 3 innings of baseball.
Yeah.
And as good as that is, you're seeing the community people, friends and colleagues and new friends, and you're chatting and just talking about all sorts of other stuff, and it's just a blast. But the background of that landscape with the river and the bridges and the sun setting, it's just a fabulous experience. So I think it'll be a hit this year. We're going to miss it. I certainly will miss it. But hopefully they're back next year and stronger than ever.
And that leads me to the bigger, you brought up community, that leads me to the bigger question. Now, I'm a Merrimack Valley boy, born and raised, and I've lived all over the valley, and I've worked all over the valley, including Lowell, in media over a number of years. And the challenge here in the Merrimack Valley has been connecting a thread through the valley, because if you live in Newburyport like I do, and Amesbury and Salisbury, Haverhill and Methuen is an entirely different planet, and Lowell is a different planet, and Manchester, New Hampshire is a different planet, even though we all share a same region. Talk about the challenges of trying to connect Lowell, because I think that's what the Spinners provide and the music festival provides, and the Summer Music Series, and even the Songus Center. It draws people to Lowell from the rest of the Merrimack Valley, so they can say, hey, this is pretty nice. It's worth the 15-minute drive, which they think is an hour and a half for some reason.
Well, I think you're right. It sort of draws the whole region. And I remember sitting at a game, and the folks in front of us, and I think they were from Westford or Littleton or something, and it was first time to Lowell.
Yeah.
And they had the kids, and they said, "Wow, I never knew this was here." And they, and at the time we were running ads. The initial. There's a lot to like about Lowell ads, and what we did at the time with the ads was to take a picture of a bunch of kids at a Spinners game, and the tagline was a lot to like, and the title was "Minor League Baseball, Minor to Whom?" And these kids were having a blast. It's not minor; it's a major event, and so you had kids from all over enjoying, America's pastime. Same thing with at the time the hockey team that was here, but now we have UMass Lowell hockey, and certainly baseball and other things, basketball, and that's growing. And hockey's always been sort of their flagship sport, but I think that'll come back, and that draws folks, and that's a great fun time. So I think we just got to get past this downtime and keep our spirits up, and then just march into 21 with a game plan and determination to get back to where we were and more.
Great.
What do you think, Doug? Because you're working at Merrimack Valley Magazine, which is trying to pull off this feat that all of us in the media in the Merrimack Valley has been trying to pull off forever, which is to unite the valley.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting, and part of it, there was a challenge. I think a big part of the challenge had to do with, how much entertainment is out there. People can sit and watch movies in their own homes. Why go see a band?
Right.
And they forget of what it's like. It's a completely different experience to see a band in a live. It's a completely different experience going to the Lowell Folk Festival and seeing a musician than watching them on YouTube, which is going to feel empty in comparison. Right? And it's not just the food, it's not just being there with your family, it's the audience, it's the interaction, it's the spontaneity, it's even the sound quality is going to be completely different.
It's just a weird take, because people who grew up in Haverhill, I grew up in Haverhill, would drive to North Conway before they drive to Lowell.
Yeah.
They would think it's a shorter trip. It just seems we're split in a way that's, again, challenging, just trying to draw it all together. But you get people out to Lowell for the first time, and you go, holy cow.
Yeah.
Look at all the restaurant choices. Look at all the entertainment choices. It's a beautiful mill town. It's just,
And each one has, they're all connected by the river, and you can, you can follow them along. But each one has the unique attractions. But we started out talking about radio, and I don't know. Again, I'm not sure we met. I'm not sure how old you are, but you may not remember WLLH, which was another AM radio station here in Lowell. But it was LLH, Lowell, Lawrence, Haverhill, and it connected the valley, the voice of the valley, and that was their approach in the stuff they did. So they were, at least from a radio perspective, reaching all across the valley from Lowell to Haverhill, literally in their call letters. So that's been done. I think they're no longer doing that around, but I think there are efforts, and each one of these towns has, the mill cities, and they've all had they all have assets. We have our great assets here, and I'm sure others do. Eventually, I think I know people who go to Haverhill, they come to Lowell. I go to Lawrence for my New Balance shoes, and the place, they all have their own selection of different unique restaurants and shops and whatnot. So I think in many ways, in what Merrimack Valley Magazine is doing with is showing that diversity of businesses, of activities, and events.
Yeah, I mean, we have this one thing in common. We have this one thing in common across the valley, and that's the river itself. And because these cities and towns grew up along the river, there's a lot we have in common. And we tend to see divisiveness in certain ways, probably because maybe we're too close. Maybe we're so much alike, these towns are so much alike, that it's hard for them to see the commonalities. And yet, at the same time, there does seem to be this cultural tradition around here of dismissing what's local, which is absurd.
Yep.
I mean, if you look at the writers, if you look at the artists, if you look at the, like just across the board, how much has come out of this region, it's a fantastic hotbed for cultural activity. And yet when you talk to people about what's come out of here, so you can get a little bit of a, kind of a downer response sometimes. And it's completely unfortunate, and it's ahistorical. This isn't, this is a thriving region that's produced a lot of great stuff that hasn't just impacted our region, but has impacted the world.
Right.
It goes beyond Jack Kerouac.
Right, and but we have Kerouac, we have a slew of current writers from O'Connor to Daniels to Marion, Paul Marion, but Haverhill area, that area, there's Whittier, there's a range of them. I think. There's been some in each town, each city along the whole valley, and I think that there's certainly a link there, and each one provided certain inspiration for those writers. And so from every level, now we're probably the only one that has a professional equity theater company, but then others have other things. So I think if you see it as that way, as a valley connected, and certainly I think economically there's a lot of work being done to work together and in terms of a regional economic development effort, but everybody's also competing. So, but if it ends up benefiting the region, then the cooperation is a great thing.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned O'Connor. His new novel, This Is No Time to Quit Drinking, which he wrote before the pandemic, by the way, despite the title. That is fantastic. I have been pushing that book on anybody out there who's even remotely interested in comic novels. Pick up This Is No Time to Quit Drinking. It is unbelievably funny. It is fantastic, and it is set in Lowell, Massachusetts. You got to check it out.
Yeah, and he and Dave Daniel, Paul, we were all, we did on Sunrise, go back to the radio, we did daily 5-minute essays that were read, and they were great, along with Dave Perry and others. So there's the writing tradition in Lowell and in the Valley, I think, is strong and continues to be strong.
Absolutely. All right, well, speaking of the river, next week is going to be our 25th show, if you can believe it, and our guest is going to be Dugan Sherwood, who's the president of the Greater Haverhill Chamber of Commerce. I know him because I went on a kayaking trip with him, and we're going to reflect a little bit on the voyagers, and we're going to get back. And he's been someone who's been very active at trying to connect Haverhill with the rest of the valley. So I think we're going to return to some of these questions next week for sure. So Henry, thank you so much for joining us. I really, really appreciate it. It was a great talk.
Thank you.
I hope we get a chance to talk again at some point and maybe grab a cup of coffee at Brewed Awakening.
All right, now I'll leave you with a magic trick, okay? In my left hand, I'm holding an apple, okay?
Yeah.
I'm putting it into my right hand. Tell me, say the magic words.
Abracadabra.
Oh, so cliche, but I'll take it. I open my right hand, the apple is gone.
First podcast
radio
magic trick.
How's that?
Wow, that's amazing. I'm stunned. There's more white hairs in my beard now than at the beginning of the show.
And you wonder how my wife still married me after that first trip. Huh?
That was great. Henry, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Thank you, Lou.
See ya.